On Sunday morning, December 26, 2004, at 0:58 and 53 seconds Universal Time Coordinated, a massive earthquake measuring 9.1 on the Richter scale struck off the west coast of Sumatra, Indonesia. The epicenter was 30 kilometers under the seabed and approximately 250 kilometers south to southwest of Banda Aceh. The earthquake generated a series of towering waves which could travel at 80 kilometers per hour in shallow water, with the largest impact felt in Indonesia and Sri Lanka. In the 9 hours following the earthquake, 14 aftershocks with magnitudes between 5.7 and 7.3 occurred along the arc from Sumatra towards Nicobar and the Andaman Islands. Within 15 minutes of the earthquake, waves began striking the coasts of northern Sumatra and the Nicobar Islands. Waves of up to 30 meters were recorded as the tsunami swept through Aceh, the hardest hit region of Indonesia. The administration has increased this amount by seeking $600 million in its request for $950 million for tsunami relief in the FY 2005 emergency supplemental. Of this total, $346 million would replenish USAID emergency aid accounts that had been drawn down in support of the U.S. government response and reimburse Defense Department accounts that were used in the relief effort. On March 16, the House passed H.R. 1268, funding all items proposed under the Tsunami Recovery and Reconstruction Fund, except for the $45 million proposed for debt reduction. The large-scale U.S. response to the tsunami is unlikely to reverse the decline in the U.S. image abroad since the September 11 attacks, because this decline primarily is due to American policies in the Middle East. However, the scale and scope of U.S. assistance could provide a positive example of U.S. leadership and military capabilities. An hour later, on the opposite side of the Indian Ocean, the waves struck the southeastern coast of India near the city of Chennai, pushing debris-choked water kilometers inland and killing more than 10,000 people, mostly women and children, since many of the men were out fishing. But some of the worst devastation was reserved for the island nation of Sri Lanka, where more than 30,000 people were swept away by the waves and hundreds of thousands left homeless. As proof of the record-breaking strength of the tsunami, the last victims of the Boxing Day disaster perished nearly 8 hours later when swelling seas and rogue waves caught swimmers by surprise in South Africa, 5,000 miles from the quake's epicenter. Vasily Tidov is a tsunami researcher and forecaster with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Center for Tsunami Research. In the process, massive segments of the ocean floor were forced upward an estimated 30 or 40 meters, up to 130 feet. The effect was like dropping the world's largest pebble in the Indian Ocean with ripples the size of mountains extending out in all directions. Tidov emphasizes that tsunamis look nothing like the giant surfing break-style waves that many of us imagine. It's a wave, but from the observer's standpoint, you wouldn't recognize it as a wave, Tidov says. It's more like the ocean turns into a white water river and floods everything in its path. Once caught in the raging waters, if the currents don't pull you under, the debris will finish the job. In earthquakes, a certain number of people die but many more are injured. It's completely reversed with tsunamis, says Tidov. Almost no injuries, because it's such a difficult disaster to survive. Both Barrero and Tidov took part in U.S. Geological Survey expeditions in early 2005 to measure the full extent of the tsunami that struck Sumatra. It was during these expeditions that scientists confirmed maximum wave heights of more than 131 feet on the northwestern tip of the island. Barrero remembers coming upon a colossal freighter loaded with bags of cement that had been flipped on its back with its propeller in the air. This was the most extreme tsunami event since 1960, says Barrero, referring to the 8.6 magnitude Chilean earthquake and tsunami that punished the Pacific, including the leveling of Hilo, Hawaii, 15 hours after the quake. Tidov will never forget the scene of widespread devastation he witnessed on Sumatra even months after the tsunami waters had subsided. Before the Indian Ocean tsunami occurred, USGS geologists had been assessing tsunami hazards in California, seeking evidence of past tsunami deposits along California's shores. Not long after we started our California work in 2004, the Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami struck, which changed the focus of our efforts for several years, said Richmond. At the time, that tsunami was the largest natural disaster in our lifetimes, both in terms of lives lost and widespread impact. Our observations on many different shorelines around the Indian Ocean went a long way in helping us to understand the variability of deposits from a single event in multiple coastal settings. Geist, too, said he and his USGS counterparts' research since then has focused on taking the lessons learned from the 2004 and 2011 tsunamis and applying them to hazard issues that affect the U.S. Before the Indian Ocean tsunami occurred, USGS geologists had been assessing tsunami hazards in California, seeking evidence of past tsunami deposits along California's shores. Not long after we started our California work in 2004, the Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami struck, which changed the focus of our efforts for several years, said Richmond. At the time, that tsunami was the largest natural disaster in our lifetimes, both in terms of lives lost and widespread impact. Our observations on many different shorelines around the Indian Ocean went a long way in helping us to understand the variability of deposits from a single event in multiple coastal settings. Geist, too, said he and his USGS counterparts' research since then has focused on taking the lessons learned from the 2004 and 2011 tsunamis and applying them to hazard issues that affect the U.S. Initially, my research focus was evaluating the performance of hazard assessment models if they had been used prior to the tsunami, Geist said. Since then, our research has focused more on taking the lessons learned from both tsunamis and applying them to hazard issues that affect the U.S. Bruce Jaffe, research oceanographer, said that earthquakes and tsunamis like those in 2004 have brought awareness and the need to study and prepare for these often underestimated hazards. The take-home message is that we still have a lot to learn about what the real hazard of tsunamis are, he said. We're getting there, but it's taking time.